So in verse 38, as we read, it says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village. And we know it's Bethany from other places in the scriptures, where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now, we love Martha. Go alpha females. She leaves the house and goes to Jesus and says, hey, will you come to my house? There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's no part of us who are like, oh, stinking Martha. How dare you go invite Jesus to the house and try to bless your brother and sister? Right? So there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great thing. He goes on from there, and it says, and if we look at other places of Martha, when, like, for example, it's Martha that sends word to Jesus, hey, the friend, Lazarus, whom you love, is dying. It's Martha when after Lazarus does die, Jesus comes to town. He comes back to Bethany, where they're trying to kill him, as Jesus notes there in John 11. And it's Martha that runs out to him, and Mary chills in the house, right? And then later, Martha comes back, and she says, the master's or the teacher's looking for you. So then Mary goes out to him. Interestingly enough, sometimes people want to, anyway, the reality is Martha is just alpha. That's okay. Because when she goes to see Jesus in John 11, she says, if you had been here, my brother would have died. She runs out and complains to him. And then when she goes back to Mary, she tells Mary, hey, the teacher is looking for you. Then Mary runs out there, and what does she say? Hey, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Right, so there's no more righteousness between Martha and Mary. She's in that case, they're both just like, yo, where were you? Mary just waits to say it, right? She's more of the beta personality, the type B personality. So there's no slight here on alpha or beta. There's no slight here on women who are going out and ministering. There's no slight on ministry, right? There's nothing wrong with any of the ministry that takes place here. Feeding her family, feeding guests, making sure Jesus is in the house. These are all ministries that we would applaud no matter what our genders are, right? No matter who you are. You'll go, yeah, this is what we want. This is how we should roll. But there's this little key here. So she goes out, she gets Jesus, and then it says, verse 19, she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. We'll talk more about this, but it's called a reflexive in Greek, and what that means is that in the Greek, it doesn't really bear it out in English. It's that Mary took the initiative to sit at his feet. In other words, it wasn't an invitation by Jesus. It's a contrast. So John's giving us a contrast that doesn't necessarily come through all the way in English. And that is that Martha took the initiative and she made sure Jesus came to the house. Mary took the initiative and purposely did not help Martha, but instead sat at Jesus' feet. Does that make sense? So each woman made a purposeful decision to do what they thought was best to do. After that, and we'll get back more to Mary's part. After that, though, it says this, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. Have you ever thought about the fact, what does it mean that she was distracted? That's like a huge part, right? If you just read it, you go, well, she was distracted. But what was she distracted from? Right? We have laws that say don't text and drive. And of course, we all follow them all the time, right? Because if you're texting while you're driving, you're distracted, right? You don't see what's in front of you. You end up paying attention to something else, and that can result in, a fatality or a ticket or whatever. So it's the same idea. The idea is here that she was supposed to be focusing on something else. It doesn't mean she wasn't supposed to be ministering, right? It'd be a little weird if she invited Jesus and, hey, can you come over for dinner? And then just did nothing. And just said, well, you're Jesus. I figured you'd make it appear. Or whatever. Right? And we all know people like that in our life, and we love them. We love them. But the problem wasn't that she was going to make dinner. The problem wasn't that she went out to go get him. The problem wasn't, there was no problem in any of that. The problem was that she got distracted with that. And the word distracted there, it means to be pulled away. So she had the Son of God in her house, and she was pulled away from him. She was pulled away from listening to him. And that happens a lot in the scriptures, actually. There's a lot of examples of that. You have in Mark chapter 6 where the disciples feed the 5,000, then they get sent away. This is the Cliff Notes version, right? They get sent away. And then Jesus comes to them later on. They're in a boat. It's stormy. They're rowing against the wind and the waves. Jesus says he walks in the water. He's going to pass them by, but they see him and they thought he was a ghost. So evidently the disciples believed in ghosts. But they think he's a ghost, so they scream out in fear, and Jesus stops, and he says, no, don't worry, it's me. And then Peter says, oh, if it's you, command me to walk out on the water. And then Jesus does. And so Peter walks on the water. He begins to doubt because he sees the winds and the waves. The reality, the physical reality of the situation causes a tremendous doubt in his mind. And so he begins to sink. Then he calls out to Jesus. Jesus rescues him. They go back to the boat. When they get back to the boat, the wind and the waves immediately go away. It's just calm, right? And this is, to me, maybe not for you, and that's okay, but for me, this is, I think, one of the most profound ideas, just because I've experienced it. When they see him calm the wind and the waves, it says that they were astonished. Literally, they were standing beside themselves. They were outside of their own mind, is what it literally means. And it says because they gained no insight from the miracle of the loaves. And that, to me, it seems impossible. It seems, can you imagine? So there's 5,000 men. So that means, there's women, children. So what are we talking about? 12, 13, 14,000 people there? They sit down by 50s, and they get 12 baskets from some lunch that Andrew rips off from some kid. He didn't rip it off, but it's like, hey, here's this kid, he's got a lunch. Oh, here you go, Jesus. If I was a kid, I'd be like, for real? But anyway, he hands him his lunch. Evidently, Andrew had some sort of inkling, or else that's just an absolutely just ridiculous thing to hand to Jesus. But he gives lunch. So they fed all these thousands of people from 12 baskets. I don't know how long it would take to feed. I know it takes like 45 minutes for you guys to get through the line here, right? And that's like a buffet line. Imagine just 12 dudes handing out from one basket. And you would think, person number 20, you'd be like, oh, there's more. You'd think by person number 100, you'd be like, this is pretty incredible. I just keep handing stuff out of my basket, right? You would think by person number 1,000, you'd be like, okay, this thing is, right? But they were so hard-hearted, it said. Remember when the people first get there? Do you remember why they, actually, let's back up. Remember why they went there? It says, Jesus said, let's get away for a while. They're supposed to go to get away from the crowds. They had just come back from this mission trip. It said they hadn't even had time to eat that day. If you go through the whole day, it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They haven't eaten all day, and they just came off a mission trip. Jesus said, hey, let's go relax. And then when they get there, they take a boat, but the people manage to run. You're like, when did you guys become marathon runners? But they run around the sea. Was it Galilee? They run around. And then when they get off the boat, they're there again. And they're not super excited about this. And it notes that Jesus had compassion on them. So when it gets late in the day, the disciples come to Jesus and they say, make these people go away. The heart of ministry, right? It's late. This is a wilderness. Get rid of those guys, would you, Jesus? We're here for vacation, yo. You brought us here. You promised, right? And then Jesus says, you give them something to eat. If ever there's an adult, have a fit moment, I feel like that's it. No, it's you can't be serious right now. And then to feed them for hours, and then he goes, get in the boat, and they get in the boat, and it says they're rowing against the waves until, the third watch, which is between 3 and 6 a.m. These guys have been going for a long time. Because of their circumstances and their responses to how they viewed the people, how they viewed the ministry, they were unable to see the minister. They were unable to see Jesus. So their own hardness of heart causes them to not even, they participated in the ministry, miraculous ministry. They administered it. They watched it happen. They experienced it. They were there, and they gained no insight through it. That's the power of a hard heart. It happens again with Peter, right? He says, Peter, to the fellas, who do men say that I am? And they say, they say you're Jeremiah. They say you're Elijah. And he's, but who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you're the Son of God. You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. Jesus says, I am. Very good, Peter. My Father revealed that to you. You didn't use flesh and blood. You didn't just conjure that up. My Father, you had divine revelation to understand that. If I was Peter, I'd be like, that's right. You fools didn't, I did. All right? Walked on water, won't mention sinking, have incredible revelation. That's right. And then Jesus says, so here's what's going to happen. They're going to torture me. And I'm going to die. And Peter grabs him. And the word there it says is to grab violently. He grabs him. It's not just he's pulled him aside Jesus, okay, no. No, it's the idea is he grabs him. That's wild. From you're the Christ to, he says, that'll never happen to you. And Peter says, get behind me, Satan. Right? Or Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You don't know what spirit you're of. So here they are. They're so focused on their thing, they miss the man. They miss the Lord. And it's just. I wrote down a ton of those examples where you have, you have in Luke 9, the Samaritans don't give Jesus a place to stay. And James and John are like, hey, should we call down fire on Samaria and kill them all? What does Jesus say? You don't know what spirit you're of. Their eyes are on the ministry. They're like, yeah, we're here to get Jesus a place to stay. Oh, you're not going to do it? Oh, really? We're going to burn you to death. I mean, that's pretty wild. You have in Matthew 16 again where Jesus warns them about the leaven of the Pharisees. And they get into the boat and they realize they don't have bread and they start arguing with each other. Oh, we don't have bread. Who didn't bring the bread? Why didn't you bring the bread? You should have got the bread. And Jesus goes, why are you arguing about bread? Don't you know who I am? Don't you understand by now that that's not an issue in your life? See, whenever we get our eyes on the ministry or on ministry in general, whenever we get our eyes on the people in it, whenever we take our eyes off the Lord, that's where we go. And that's where Martha goes. She ends up doing this. This is pretty wild. It says there she's distressed, so she's pulled away. And it says she's distracted by all the preparations. Your translation might say serving or much serving. The NIV translates it preparations that had to be made. It's one word. It's actually the same word. For example, Phoebe in Romans 16, the diakonos or diakoa, or the same word for deacon in 1 Timothy 3, where it describes the office of a deacon. It's the same word. So in Greek, deacon as in office and servant, they're the same word, used interchangeably. So it's just that they say you have a concern. You're being pulled away because of all the service you have or the service that you feel like that you should do. And so Mary's response, so she's distracted. Her response to her distraction is this. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? And this is kind of where it goes. This is kind of what happens. She gets concerned about the ministry, and that concern for the ministry, the serving that needs to be done, then moves out to other people who are not doing the same ministry that she should do, that she thinks that they should do. In fact, it moves her to a place where she actually questions the care of Jesus, the love of Jesus. Think about that for a second. She comes back to Jesus and she says, don't you care? And we'll kind of talk about this in a different venue because the disciples wake him up and they also ask him, don't you care? So this dramatic concern for ministry, for making dinner and good things, right? Good things. Again, the ministry is never the problem in this case. Making dinner for Jesus, making dinner for the disciples, and making sure her household is squared away and has food. Great things, right? But when they're focused upon as the priority of life, they question Jesus' goodness, and then she questions, and she wants Jesus to command her sister to do what she thinks is right. See the dysfunction there? See the breakdown there, the difficulty, the destruction that can reap in a family or in a church? That when you come to a place, when you're just focused on, and again, the ministry is never the problem. But, look, for example, one of us during the week straightens the chairs at the church, right? Because you guys are crazy. I don't know, you wiggle them. I don't know what you do, right? But the chairs, I'm just messing with you. But the chairs they always get messed up. And that's fine, right? Because you're sitting in them and you're trying to get your coffee and your Bible and, whatever. So they get messed up. So one of us does that during the week, puts the chairs back in order. Not a big deal, right? Not a big deal. But if I'm focused on the ministry of the chair, like if I come in and I'm like, are you serious? The chairs are crooked again? Can these people not sit still? Right? And I just review all these things in my mind, and I've never done that, honestly. I never have. I joke about it, but it's, mess them up, I don't really care. So I'm going to attribute it to usually the kids like running by. Obviously, the adults have never done it in their lives, but whatever. So, but can you imagine that? If I was like, and then I'm praying while I'm doing the chairs, Lord, make them do their chairs right. I can't believe I have to do the chairs, or whatever, fill in the blank. I've missed the boat, haven't I? I've absolutely missed what's important. Because the chairs are not important, right? The chairs are a tool so that you guys have a place to sit so we can talk about the Bible, right? And then fellowship afterwards. So you have a place to sit. If you get tired during the singing, you can sit. So they're a complete tool. They're going to get messed up because they're not nailed to the floor. But we can take something that's a service, right? Because if you came in and the chairs were a complete disarray, even walking in the Spirit and loving Jesus, you would still kind of be like, what happened? What happened to the chairs? Is everything okay? And you could either look at it in a good way or a bad way, right? Depending on the mood, the blood sugar, whatever it might be. You could walk in and be like, are you serious? These guys can't even fix the chairs. What kind of lousy, you know what I'm saying? They don't care about God's house. They haven't fixed the chairs, Kind of a negative result. Or on the positive result, it might just be like, wow, what's going on? What happened? Why aren't the chairs? Wow, okay, wow, right? Either way, it can become this thing where it's an issue. That's childish, and I get it, and that's why I want to use that. Even though the chairs do need to be fixed, they only need to be fixed so that we can come in and fellowship together, and fellowship with the Lord, right? The chairs in themselves have zero importance, zero value. In the end, what will happen to these chairs? If we keep them until Jesus comes, they will one day just burn, right? They're going to go up in flame. If we don't and we get rid of them, then we'll get new chairs that will eventually burn and go up in flames, right? Because they're temporal things. So they're a temporal item that enables us to do eternal things. So what happens is Martha, she's focused on something that's important, making sure the household gets food, making sure it's taken care of. But the problem is she gets distracted with it and her focus becomes the ministry. And that's what we want to avoid. That's what we don't want to get focused on just the stuff. We're focused on Jesus.